Welcome to Mining the Mysteries, a catechetical podcast that explores the depths of our Orthodox and Catholic faith in the English tradition. I'm Matthew Stewart, Digital Media Director for the Anglican Province of America, along with your hosts Father Wade Miller and Father Randall Russell from St. Philip's Anglican Church in Blacksburg, Virginia. We're glad to have you with us as we dig deeper into the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. Welcome back, folks. Today we are recording this podcast on October 18th, which is the feast for St. Luke the Evangelist. St. Luke was not only an evangelist and writer of the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles, but he was also an iconographer, historian, and a physician. That's why we are pleased to have a physician who is a Christian in the Anglican tradition with us today to explore the intersection of faith and science as it pertains to questions of life, living, and death. We welcome Dr. Matthew McCarthy. First podcast.
Flattered. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Father Miller, go ahead and get us started talking with the good doctor this morning.
I will. Thank you for coming on, and it's great to have you on this feast of St. Luke the Evangelist as we talk a little bit about the relationship of medicine and faith, and even for our listeners, talking about how that translates not only in the medical field, but also in the church. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. But I thought maybe a good way to start is talking about a little bit of your biography, your background, like where are you from, family. Let's just get into that so people have some context of who you are. So where are you from?
Sorry. I grew up in Georgia, North Georgia, north of Athens, not that different from here. Mountains and college football and redneckery and barbecue and all the things. My parents are both missionary kids, so I'd say my family's kind of a little bit from all over. We got some Canadians, we got some Midwesterners, and my accent can go many directions depending on who I'm talking to. But yeah, grew up in North Georgia, moved up here in 2008 for school, met Val in Georgia. We went to school in North Georgia at a small private college there. I was homeschooled. I grew up, like we'll probably get more into this maybe, but grew up in the Evangelical Church, kind of Southern Baptism. And I shouldn't have a lot bad to say. I had a very good childhood. My parents sacrificed a lot for our education and for our childhood, and read a lot of good books, and it was awesome. I think my parents set the stage for where I am today, maybe in some ways not knowing it.
And you mentioned Val, Valerie, your wife. She's from around the Quad Cities, right, in Iowa?
Yeah, she's from Des Moines, outside of Des Moines.
Yeah.
And so we met freshman year of college and dated for about, most of college, almost 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And you guys went to college at Toccoa, and Toccoa is part of the Alliance?
So it's the Christian Missionary Alliance. It's not actually Baptist. I guess it's closer to Assemblies of God. You may know more about the history of it than I do, but yeah. Big missionary focus, but lots of independence going on there. Our church growing up definitely went through some personality cult, some splits over not dogma.
Yeah.
But big emphasis on biblical literacy. I felt I grew up with a good grounding in Scripture and knowing Scripture. So used to be a Bible quizzer. Anybody know what Bible quizzing is?
Oh, yeah. I think Stu is a part
We
of that.
had what's called Bible Bowl, which is set up like Jeopardy, except it's all Bible questions, verse memorization, things like that. So, yeah, we had that.
Basically that.
Yeah.
We had like little seats, and when you jump, your buzzer went off. And
yeah, so we actually stood at a podium and had little buzzers.
Mm-hmm.
What is John the Baptist?
Good time.
Yeah.
We actually got to travel and compete, so that was pretty fun.
The one thing I know about, I don't know much about Christian Missionary Alliance, but the one thing I do know is that they're heavily involved in missionary activity, evangelism, some of those things. And yeah, so no, that's good. And you also have 3 kids?
3 kids, 6, 8, and 10.
Yeah.
You're wearing us out.
Yep. They're wonderful. You have a beautiful family, been very blessed. So talking a little bit about your church background, how in the world did you then become a Anglican?
Yeah. So my brother Ethan started going to an Anglican church up in Chicago. He was up there for seminary, and anyway, long story short, so he was planting some of the seeds even 10 years ago. And then we came to St. Philip's. I came to St. Philip's to speak for the pregnancy center 6 years ago now. And yeah, I didn't know what was going on. But that was like my first feet in the door. And then some friends of ours, Katie and Ruel, had started coming here. And then late COVID, like the first year of COVID, so like a year into COVID, Advent, it was the first week of Advent 2020. We decided to try it out and haven't looked back. I don't know, it checked a lot of boxes immediately. Just, I think like probably for the first 6 months, I still had my Southern Baptist sphincters squeezing a little bit, waiting for the other shoe to fall. There's going to be something crazy here that I don't agree with. And then I'm just kind of leaning into it more. Everything just continued to make great sense. And I don't remember who the quote is, but the idea of the church I grew up in, I don't want to say too much bad about it, but it was very much the one note, right? And then coming to Anglicanism was the full chord. Just so much more things that just made sense. Every Sunday morning there's lots of, to push the analogy, harmony. All these things complement and speak to each other, and the liturgy and the parish life and the rule of life and the offices, and it's perfect. So Val and I actually got to go, it's 2 years ago now. We'd been planning a trip to England, but then this all happened. This whole Anglican thing happened. So we got to go to Oxford to the center of Anglo-Catholicism. Mm-hmm. And it was just really fun to read some of the history and see some of the places. We're sold hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah. No, that's great. Good. Yeah. So the next question, piggybacking on what you've told me, how did you get interested in medicine? What was it that kind of drew you to the medical field?
Yeah, I don't know the initial moment. At some point, I must have said something to my mom about being interested in medicine. A friend of hers was the nurse manager for our local ICU. So Cheryl, that's this friend, got me signed up for a certified nurse's assistant course. So I had volunteered at the hospital at age 14, 15, and then at 15 finished this course. It was very basic course, but started working in the hospital in various departments as a nurse assistant. So I worked essentially as a tech in the ICU, in the ER, med surg, step down units, and just got to float and rotate everywhere. I did some OB, did some surgery. I was a very shy, quiet kid. So it was I think my mom had a bigger plan there than I knew. But yeah, I basically grew up in a hospital with, I think we had 300 employees, or 350 employees or something like that, and 4 of us were guys. So it was like a middle-aged woman world, and just learning to listen to people, learning to talk to people, hearing women sit around and fuss about men, very great for a teenager, and getting lots of vocabulary and experience and knowing what I wanted to do. So I worked there all through college and entered med school with a little bit more of an idea of what I was getting into, having started kind of, and I think that, as we might get into later, informed what I do as a physician now, maybe more than some of the technical things I went on to study, like celebrating the Feast of St. Luke. And I was thinking about this last night, what did St. Luke have to offer people? What did physicians in that time period really have to offer people? I don't know. It seems like they were respected. They were they had a role in the community, but they didn't have all this stuff that we equate with our identity as professional physicians, medical professionals. We have all this knowledge of the human body and pharmacology and whatever. So I do think there's some intangibles there of caring for people, and that I learned at an early age. When I was wiping butts and doing baths for people and shaving, I was the guy. So there are a lot of older guys in ICU or step down that, this guy needs shaved. Matt, can you give this guy a shave? I wasn't shaving myself yet, but I'm sitting there buzzing this halfway comatose guy. It's just good learning to interact with people at their worst, interact with people who are suffering, and in a very material way, which is one of y'all's favorite topics.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, that's good. You were homeschooled. You went to Toccoa. What'd you major in Toccoa? What was your major there?
Biology and cross-cultural studies. So I had 2 majors.
So biology, cross-cultural studies, and then you went to med school. Where'd you go to med school?
We came to Blacksburg to go to BCom, which is the osteopathic school here in Blacksburg, for those who might not know. I won't go way out into the weeds of what osteopathic medicine is, but yeah, basically there's 2 schools of thought, or 2 schools of medicine in the United States, osteopathy and allopathic. Osteopathy is traditionally more musculoskeletal. So you'll see a lot of osteopaths in sports medicine, orthopedics, and then certainly the med school here had a mission for primary care in Appalachia, and that was what I wanted to do, was family practice. A lot of the grads from VCOM go into family medicine, pediatrics, OB, internal medicine. So good focus on what I wanted to do. So we're super happy with it.
What does VCOM stand for?
The Virginia College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Oh, okay. All right. No, that's good. No, that's great. What I find really interesting, not just because I have connections with this now, but the type of medicine you practice. And tell us what's unique about the practice that you have.
Sure. So I'm a family practice doctor. I am a generalist. We'll throw on words like primary care, and a lot of times people don't really know what you're talking about, but that sort of first line of care, generalist, etc. But the way so I was introduced to this while I was in medical school, but this idea of direct primary care. So direct primary care is not my idea. This is a national movement of primary care doctors who are contracting directly with the patient. In the U.S. or in the West in general, we think of healthcare as like this triangle, right? And at one point of the triangle, you've got access. At one point, you have quality. And at one point, you have cost. And we have to pick as a society where we put a dot in that triangle. We can't have all 3 of those things. If we increase access, if we increase quality, it's going to come at cost, at the expense of cost. And what direct primary care is basically saying is, no, if we cut out all the third parties, all the middlemen, we can offer all 3 of those things. So we basically offer a monthly membership, similar to a gym membership, costs less than your cell phone, gets you unlimited access to our skill set. And by the way, us here is myself and Trish Miller, friend of Minding the Mysteries podcast. So the insurance companies are involved in that. There's no hospital corporation that owns us. We see 6 to 10 patients per day. We have an hour to spend with you if we want to, if we need to. We have lots of telemedicine access. Our interests are aligned. If the patient, I'm working for the patient. I'm a tradesman here. I'm a village blacksmith, right? So if the patient is happy, if the patient is at home, healthy, happy, not calling me, guess what? I'm at home, healthy, happy, not worrying about them. So instead of a model where I get paid for you to have medical diagnoses that I can diagnose and bill your insurance for or bill you for, my time and my income is based on my patients being healthy. It makes tons of sense. It's growing all over the place. We have several other practices now in Blacksburg that are growing. We've been here for February will be 10 years, and I'm super happy with it.
Yeah, and you guys have, what, over 1,200 patients now?
Yeah, so to be a true DPC, we say you should have about 600 patients per provider. There certainly are concierge practices. People will confuse us with a concierge practice that have fewer patients per doctor and a lot higher costs and are targeting that country club. Our goal is to have, this is for every man. Actually, over a third of our practice are completely uninsured patients who are basically saying, I can afford this is meaningful healthcare, and will you keep me out of the hospital? And we're like, well, we'll do our best. So.
Yeah. I think that would be attractive to people because you're not beholden to big pharma insurance companies dictating, pushing unnecessary treatments or drugs or whatever. So yeah, I think I understand why it's growing. When we talk about healthcare, and anybody listening to this knows that's a big issue in our country because, quite frankly, it's very broken. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Sure.
How does your approach to medicine as a Christian with a Christian worldview, how would that differ from, say, a physician who is not a believer? What is it that you do that would be very different than, say, a general kind of physician that has no belief?
Sure. I'm very much still figuring this out. And I think some of that's just growing up. Some of that's, I think my thought on a lot of this has changed in the last couple of years. Some of these ideas of sacramental theology have changed some of my thoughts on this. You skipped a question there, which was going to be my segue, but what are the challenges and rewards of working as a DPC doctor? I think we have a lot of burnout in medicine, a lot of doctors who are, especially in primary care, who are quitting, are frustrated, who are, would you recommend your kids go into medicine? And most family doctors say, heck no. There's like way better ways to, if you're in this for a career, this is an exhausting career, poorly compensated, overworked. I do think in one sense, corporate medicine is part of the problem, and DPC has insulated me from some of that. But I think there's a bigger issue that comes into how do I approach this as a Christian? I think we are at a societal crossroads. Maybe this has been for all time. Maybe it's not new. We like to act like this is the end of the world, but maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe it is. But in primary care, especially if you have time to spend with people, you are basically putting yourself in the firing line of people's pain and suffering. And you guys know it as priests, it's an exhausting place to be. And the longer I've been in medicine, I think when I got out of residency, I had some of that new idealism of we've got all these great solutions and answers to people's problems, and we know the board question answers of how to treat blood pressure, diabetes, depression, anxiety, all these kinds of things. And then the longer you're in it, you're like, yeah, these things help some. We have some options. We have some help. If we start doing root cause analysis on people's problems, as a believer, your answer is very different than as a non-believer. And even there, we have a lot of Christian medicine or Christian physicians, or heaven help us, Christian counselors who are all over the map on what they believe the root causes are. But I think as sacramental, traditional, lowercase c Catholic Christians, we can say the human body and our interaction with the human body, there's tons of theology there. And almost to the point, this is like one of the main friction areas as human beings is how our physical body interacts with our spiritual life. So yeah, that's a long conversation. And what do we... Anyway, so limitations of Western medicine, frustration with what I have to offer people. Just, again, back to this idea of St. Luke. He had so little to offer people from a technical standpoint. If my identity as a Christian, or if my identity as a physician is similar to an accountant or a lawyer, a professional who you pay for expertise in a field, I'm not looking at people's taxes. I can't just draw a pencil line at the end of the day and say, this is done. I'm looking down into the abyss of human pain and suffering, and there's no end to it. There's just no end to it. And I don't have the answer to it. So if you're not doing it vocationally as a Christian, caring and loving other people, yeah, it's exhausting and you'll burn out. I'm reading a book by Georges Bernanos. I don't know if I'm saying that, but it's called The Diary of a Country Priest. And it's a fantastic book about this like young priest who's in a difficult parish and he's struggling and he's got health issues. And anyway, I haven't finished it yet, but one of the quotes that really hit me was at some point he says, we priests suffer for other people. We suffer through them. And then he says, like, this thought came to me yesterday and it watched over me like an angel all night. Which is like, this guy's a really good writer and really inspiring writer, but this idea that we are called as Christians to bear each other's burdens, to bear others' burdens, to suffer with people. And if that's why you do what you do, whether you're a priest or a social worker or a CNA in a nursing home or a physician, then you're actually offering something beyond the Western medicine becomes a piece. And I think science is a way to truth, but that's your insulation from burnout. That's what changes what you do versus what the establishment offers. So. Sorry, long answer.
No, it's good. I think if Father Randall or myself dropped over dead, probably what they'd put on our tombstones is matter matters against Gnosticism and everything. But one of the things as you were talking, it's so true, is oftentimes the way we look at things, because we like to professionalize everything, right?
Sure.
And we like to put everything in a category. So a medical doctor heals your body, a priest heals your soul.
Sure.
And what I like what you're saying is we are made up of body and soul, and they are intertwined. And that kind of leads me to the next question, which is about suffering, especially thinking as a doctor. As you think about suffering, what are some of the observations in terms of how our culture grapples with this? And then how, as a medical doctor, do you see your role in helping people that are going through physical pain or suffering of various kinds?
Sure. I mean, there's the obvious answer, or maybe not explicitly obvious. As Christians, we are called to suffering, right? Our Lord suffered, and certainly the underlying understanding of modernity as a movement is that technology will solve our problems, that it's getting better and better. One day we'll all live on Mars eternally. I'm being facetious, but certainly this is propagated by commercial interests in our society. We want to believe that. We want to believe that somebody in a lab will solve the problem to whatever disease. We're happy to run 5Ks to raise money for this or that research. And so this idea of whatever, better living through chemistry. And I think if you go back to this idea of Christ as a physical body, Christ had a physical body. I think that's a beautiful contemplative prayer cue for a medical professional. Mm-hmm. What was Christ's body like? And people have taken this too far probably, but I don't know. Did he look like his mom? What does a human body look like if there's no effects of sin? Because he's without sin. So versus what's a human body look like with sin, or how much of what I'm treating in front of me at my office is the effects of sin versus how much is just part of being human. These bodies are not meant to last forever. Mm-hmm. Psalm says you're going to make it to 75, maybe 80. That's pretty good. And that hasn't changed for a long time. So this idea that modernity will make us live forever, I think, is flawed. Suffering is failure. Suffering is to be avoided at all costs. We spend tons of money avoiding suffering. And our Christ he's on a cross, beaten, bleeding, dying. And so we have a hard time reconciling that. And that's an interesting tangent, is the rejection of the crucifix as a symbol of Christianity. Doesn't that kind of set the stage for where we are in modern culture and modern medicine? You can't, those two are mutually incompatible. So, there are no technical solutions for moral problems. And that's what we are asked to offer daily. I want a pill, I want a treatment, I've been taking care of myself, and I really want to get to the bottom of this, and I want to solve it, and I want you to help me. And you're like, yeah, happy to. I do this all day, every day, and I'm pretty sure we're not going to solve that. And so then that kind of like friction of, I want to be honest, I want to be upfront with people. I'm not trying to have the secret knowledge that I dispense for money. I want to be totally upfront with people, but people don't want to hear it. So it's managing people's expectations and managing, I would say most of the time I can't say what needs to be said. Or I don't know what needs to be said, maybe. Val and I recently, I guess this is a HIPAA violation of my wife, but she'll be okay. So Val recently had an ovarian torsion, which is very painful, fairly sudden onset. Anyway, emergency surgery within 7 hours. She was really hurting. And Val and I have a very close relationship and talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And just realizing, seeing somebody I know that well suffering, when we are in pain and when we're suffering, there's things we can't say. Either we know and believe this stuff and it's there, or we're going to have to work this through later. Because when you're in that moment suffering, you need somebody to come along and just listen and give you that cup of cool water, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's comforting to know that it's like, just because you're a medical doctor doesn't mean that you're going to be able to heal everybody's physical ailments or their pain or anything like that. Now, yeah, question, I was just interested in terms of, do you see today a greater emphasis being placed on spirituality and religion and medicine? Or do you think that's something, as we talked before, where it's still separated to like church and state, like with the medical community? Do you see, okay, that's the physical, the empirical, and so that has no connection or overlap with any kind of discussion of spirituality?
Yeah, I don't want to speak too broadly, but in my small sample size, I'd say through my training, there's always this token nod to prayer and faith, and it was always tucked into the sort of cultural sensitivity training. It was never, I think we are moderns. I think we pretend we're postmoderns. I think maybe in our art or our talk shows or our reading, we're much more postmodern maybe and willing to engage with postmodern thought, but in how we take care of our physical bodies, we're several generations now into this idea of post-enlightenment modernity, and that it's just there. Yeah, I don't know totally. I think this is a funny word, whole person care. You'll just hear that constantly. We need whole person care. It's mind, spirit, body. But nobody knows what that means. Or maybe everybody means something different by it. Mm-hmm. No, it's there. That's what people really want. People want more than just a pill, or they say they want more than just a pill. But people haven't thought it. In my experience, most of the people I deal with haven't thought it through super deeply. So I didn't mention earlier. So another thing I do is prison medicine. Every Thursday, I'm in a maximum security prison for the state of Virginia, taking care of. And it's interesting there. There's so much more contrast, certainly more darkness. We see Chad and I also have the state psych prison, Marion. So we're interacting with, very psychiatrically technical solutions to more problems, right? These are guys that can't be put anywhere else. They are super dangerous to themselves or others if they're not essentially restrained, frankly, sedated. These guys are on high dose antipsychotic medications that everybody's opposed to. If somebody comes in my street practice, so if you're in prison, you call everything outside of prison street. But my Blacksburg practice, people come in there with depression, anxiety. They're like, no, I don't want to just blunt my feelings. I want to deal with them. But whereas at the psych prison, it's like, these guys have to be on stuff, or they're frankly going to do serious damage to themselves or somebody else. And our society doesn't have I don't have another answer for some of this stuff. And so I'm losing my train of thought here, but being at the point of friction there, our physical bodies point constantly to spiritual realities, and how we interact with our physical bodies is inseparable from that. And to act like it's not is disingenuous, and it's a dead-end street. People are burned out and they're tired of it, but they're not willing to give up maybe the sort of like rational, quote unquote, rational comfort zone that Western thought and culture gives us, where I can be a complete consumer materialist, hedonist, and I live in a Christian nation, and I go to church on Easter. If you really lean into what you believe, you got to make changes. You got to make changes. So.
No, that's good. And one of the things, and I know that there's just no clear answer, but you do have traditions, say like the Jehovah's Witness or others, that tend to refuse medical treatment because this idea of faith, if you have faith. And I again, this is a loaded question, but where is that line in the sand of, okay, I'm having issues. I'm thinking of people that are maybe dealing with cancer, and they're being encouraged to do treatments like chemo and radiation and things. And I know ultimately it's their decision, but where is the line of, okay, I'm just going to trust God, or trust God, but I need to also be aggressive with treatment, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, obviously very individual to the case, but it's not a question you're going to be able to answer confidently if you don't have sort of your first things first in your prior. If health is the idol, and death is the worst thing that can happen to you, if suffering is to be avoided at all costs, if some of this groundwork is not set, it's very hard to counsel that person, because and they're also in a medical system that is, for better or worse, it's not sinister kid kind of stuff. The medical system is trying to offer help to people. It's sincere people it's sincere systems, academia, research, pharmaceutical companies, hospital corporations, all these different therapies, controlled trials. These are all ostensibly set up to answer our Western questions. We're throwing money at them to answer questions that we want answered. In the individual case with a patient, you have to have a relationship with them where you can have these conversations. If you don't have that, it's not going to work. You have to have time to spend with them and think some of these thoughts through, and you have to customize it to what they're ready and willing to hear, because it's not just black and white. I think science is a path to truth. I think God gave us rational minds and a scientific method and the ability to test hypotheses and move through possibilities, but it's not ultimately the reality is greater than that. And the idea of leaving all of that behind and certainly there's a movement, I think, again, I don't want to speak super broadly because my sample size is small, but you feel it. There's just Western medicine is done. This has nothing for me. It's just a corrupt, publicly traded company that is there to make a profit. Yes, it is. It is corrupt. It doesn't have your best interest in mind. But like everything, it's super nuanced. It's not black and white. And we need to lean into these things, trusting God first and foremost, that He works all things to good. All things. Everything. He works them to our good. Even heavy diagnoses or heavy treatments like chemo or radiation or whatever. It's tough. I think you guys may have more resources, but I think there probably is someone out there who has done much more thought on end-of-life issues for our time. How do we apply Catholic theology to where we are in Western medicine now, where we are in Western culture now?
Oh, that's good. Going through some of the common things that we encounter in the church and we ourselves encounter as individuals. And so this next section, how the church should interact with medicine, and I'm thinking specifically like issues of anxiety. I don't have the statistics, you might know them, but I saw where the level of anxiety in terms of every year just seems to be like escalating. And as you see this, what do you think, what is some of your beliefs on why you see such levels of anxiety rising in our culture?
Sure. I think be careful everything I say here, but these are just my thoughts. But I think that as a society, we have a lot of it comes from how parenting has changed in the last 50 years, for better or worse. I think some things, these are cultural norms and what's appropriate, but I think we've really destabilized the world for kids. We've taken away a lot of boundaries. We've taken a lot of structure away from home life. That's various causes for that. And I just see a lot of kids that are so we do, over half my panel in Blacksburg is kids under age 15. I'm a de facto pediatrician. And there's a bigger parenting gap. So like young people are having kids so much later than their parents did. So if the average first child age is now well into the third decade of life, the grandparents are now 30 years away from their own parenting. So like this, and by the way, they're totally antiquated. Nobody goes to grandma, grandpa for parenting advice. They go to books and the internet and Reddit. And so we have these just super anxious parents who are reinventing the wheel, and this whole sort of social media sphere, guruism, and like everybody's got a different opinion on it. And that's just getting passed into the kids. It's just, if there's kids learn how to walk because gravity is unrelenting. Gravity never turns off. And the kid cautiously ventures out, they fall. And God designed it this way. Kids are chubby. When they fall, they have lots of cushion, right? But in most other spheres, these kids don't have nice, firm, clear, kind guidelines on what the world is all about. And if we never tell our kids no, this I could go on and on. The anti-rape campaign at Virginia Tech in freshman orientation is no means no. And I'm like, these kids have never been told no. They have never been told no. So they don't know how to control their passions. They don't know how to like subject their emotions to a rational thought. They don't know how to order themselves. They don't know how to structure themselves. And so what do you expect? They are just bouncing off of whatever boundaries hit. They're told to break down all boundaries. And this sort of neo-Marxist thought, and it's disconcerting. It's very disconcerting. And and then you compound that with an information war. You compound that with our political sphere where, like our experts or our leaders are so laughably like incompetent. It's really disconcerting. You should be anxious. And as Christians, if we really have the peace that the world does not have, how does the church interact with that? Okay, in our parishes, we need to be modeling very clearly what it means to be a Christian, what it means to apply the gospel daily to every aspect of your life, what a prayer life means. It means discipline. It's not say a few words to God whenever you're hurting, whenever you remember to. It means you need words. The church needs to give you words. The church needs to give you a catechesis on how to pray. The church needs to put you in the wake of other saints who are praying. We have a huge tradition of this. Realize that, my emotions are lying to me. They're irrational. What is truth? How do I sort through? Cognitive behavioral therapy, right, is the only psychiatric therapy that's been proven in clinical trials. So CBT, you'll hear this. What is cognitive behavioral therapy? Basically, you sit with a therapist and they get your thoughts out into the cold light of day, and you and them and the therapist, right, evaluate these thoughts as the secular world would say beneficial, right? Or we would say truth. We renew our minds. We take every thought captive. We get these things out and we say, is that real? And then you can take a step back and have some humor about my emotions and how I feel about these things, and realize that anxiety is incredibly painful, but incredibly disturbing, but ultimately subject to our rational thought. And so we need Christians willing to suffer with others, to listen to that, to push back and say, that's not true. That about you is not true. And that doesn't mean dig up every demon of the past, or like why, or who said what to you when, or your childhood. Sure, some of that is important, but we don't wallow in that. We move forward with progress. The church is the only place that has that answer. And you just hear a lot of vague, wishy-washy Christian answers to some of those kind of questions. So we need saints. We need saints doing the work of the church, and not publicly, not on the street corner, but when the parishioner comes through the channels to the priest to say, man, I'm hurting, I'm suffering, the priest needs a parish ready to pull that parishioner in and say, oh, we have a place for you. We're all here suffering. We're all hurting. We're all banged up. And this is not an easy fix. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a pill. It's change. We're called to change. Christ calls us to change. And that's exactly what the world doesn't want. So
that's good. No, that's very good. When we talk about also the church, one of the things that I think Stu and I were talking about the other day, But you look at particular cultures like the Asian culture or the Hispanic culture, and there's a reverence for the elderly. There's the understanding that we respect, and we also seek to learn from the elderly.
Mhm.
In our culture, we look at the elderly and we basically say they've lost any kind of utilitarian value.
Mhm.
And so we put them in old folks' homes or whatever. What are your thoughts about caring and ministering for those that are elderly or even those that are facing end-of-life issues?
Yeah, I think obviously Scripture and the Gospels have tons to say about caring for the least of these. The human life span is an arc. We don't believe that in Western culture. We have kids, and then they grow up, and you're supposed to age with dignity, right? As opposed to this idea that we kind of peak and then we decline. And I think when the New Testament says caring for the fatherless and the widow, this is who it's talking about, is the helpless young and the elderly and those without the resources to take care of themselves. And this is where we're supposed to be. And I think there's a reason why there's not like a 4-step program for how to do this. You just have to roll up your sleeves and get into it. And I've seen both of you caring for elderly people, and it's not scripted. It's spur of the moment, reacting to the need in front of you. I think it was like, I want my kids to have this experience too. And your kids have had some of this, but when I was a teenager, I was working in a hospital caring for failing human bodies. It's nitty and gritty. The Gospels are full of human, suffering, death, self-harm, sexual sin, violence, excrement, mud. Jesus goes like right into these situations and deals with them and has answers for them. And the answers are mostly just human answers. Here, I can do that for you. I can prop you up. I can help feed you. I can run the store for you. And our society wants to professionalize that and outsource it. And do other cultures have it better? Yeah, probably. I think all cultures have strengths and weaknesses. I'm also a civil surgeon. So one of my other side gigs is I work with immigrants coming to the United States. So they have to come to some physicals as part of their green card process. So we get to see people from all over. And it's apparent that other cultures care for we have a lot of immigrants. The first thing they do when they get to the United States is they're either sending money back to their parents or they're bringing their parents over here. Blacksburg has a huge international population, and a lot of our international population is the parents of Virginia Tech professors or other people in town who have brought their parents over here to care for them and to honor them. So I think the church actually traditionally has a good track record of that. We've done that in different phases of the history of the church, but I think we're doing a great job of it now. And I think some thinking on that, some forums on that, some local parish attention to that is really important. Super important.
Yeah, I think in our culture, everything is about empowering self, right? Mm-hmm. I remember even as a kid, cartoons were about empowering self. And it's all about your self-esteem, and you can be anything you want to be, and you just need to think it, dream it, and you become it, that kind of thing. And I think when people are raised in such raw selfishness, a lot of times then, especially as they get older, it becomes so entrenched in their psyche, and it's almost like they're incapable of thinking about other people, because it's always, the question's always coming back to, how does this affect me, or how does this inconvenience me?
What's the classic high school graduation present, the Dr. Seuss book?
All the places you'll go.
Oh, the places you'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Think that through. Look at where humans end up. Look at where your high school class is now.
Yeah.
Look them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all suffering. We're all hurting, and we have the answer. We have the answer. United States of America is not the city of God. The United States of America is another culture with massive blind spots and flaws, and serving. It's not serving the Lord. Its first things are not first. And so if we look to our society and our culture for answers to these problems, we're missing the point of being a Christian. You're just missing the point of what's the point here? We need to look to the church for those answers and look to the tradition. There's tons of thinking and writing on it. And the rank and file need to get that. It can't just be the knowledge of the priests in the blogosphere.
Yeah. No, I know. And if there was one thing, and maybe I just need to really emphasize this more in sermons and teaching and everything, but Jesus turned everything upside down, right? He destroyed the enemy by death. Just everything's turned upside down. And so when we come to all these questions about medical ethics, medicine, and all this stuff, a lot of times what the church has to say is, or what the church should be saying, is quite different than what the culture says. And I think we're in a context now. I'm not going to get into all the politics of this. We will talk about this a little bit. There's a major mistrust of the medical community. And I think part of that is the church does have something to offer, and it is an alternative to some of the things, I'm not saying everything, but some of the things that we are told. We won't get into this, I promise, although Trish kind of wanted me to ask this. Stu and I have talked about this quite a bit, the whole push towards transhumanism, right? It's like looking for immortality by machine technology and the combination of humanity, right? And I think, it's something that when I first heard about transhumanism 25 years ago, I laughed it off. Now it's being talked about in major universities, research centers. It's crazy, right?
Sure.
We're all going to be like Frankensteins. But anyways.
That's the next frontier, is the systematic breaking down of what it means to be human.
Exactly.
And
redefining.
Yeah, if you do away with gender and you do away with all of these things that make us human, then it's much easier to say, oh, what's the next step? Immortality, synthesis with machines, and before you know it, there is no more humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the third book in the Space Trilogy. What's it called? That Hideous Strength. That book is like super prophetic and very insightful on all that, I think. Probably one of Val's favorite books, and one we should all reread on that topic. By an Anglican.
Right.
I want to bring up a very non-confrontational subject, especially in our political climate today, and that is the issue of abortion. One of the things Dr. Matt has been very careful not to talk about himself or what all he's involved in, and I will honor that. But one of the things he's been very involved in is the Pregnancy Resource Center here in the New River Valley, and has served on the board and served as a medical, not just advisor, but somebody that's actually helped out with care for young women. And as we think about this issue, what are some of the pitfalls the church needs to avoid in this issue? And then what are some of the things that we need to maybe be a little bit more bold or take a stand? I know that's totally a loaded question, but that's why you're the doctor. So,
shoot. So, huge topic. I think the issue of abortion is, I think culturally, wow, this is going to sound very cynical. There's many ways in which it is a ship that has somewhat sailed. I don't see us societally taking back what has happened in the last 20 years. I think maybe a lot of people don't know this, but the pill abortion has revolutionized what the pro-life movement has been able to do. We have very little access to women who are making a decision for an abortion because it's mail order and it's too easy. It's so political. It's just very difficult to, I think our society has moved past that. So I'm not saying that very well. I'm not trying to be totally cynical. There's definitely a role for the church, obviously, in this. I think we need to be working to find ways to be the hands and feet of Christ in these situations. I think it looks different than it did 30 years ago. It looks different than it did 10 years ago. It looks very different than it looked 10 years ago. I think we are doing a lot more post-abortion care, other women's health initiatives to try to build rapport with at-risk demographics. We are still doing ultrasounds. We are still offering crisis pregnancy counseling. I think we do need Christian leaders speaking out against it, absolutely. But I think we will always have the poor, and the poor being the poor in spirit and the least of these, right? And I don't think we as Christians actually have to look that hard to find suffering people right around us. And I think we should be looking for causes to give to and people who are doing a good job at this particular ministry and support them, sure. I think it's probably more practical and helpful to be looking just at what God's put in your life. He gives you enough every day to do, and saying, God, who's in front of me? And if that is a young woman who's considering an abortion or at risk for abortion or who's had an abortion, yes, we have lots of resources for that at the Pregnancy Resource Center, the New River Valley, which is now called the Valley Women's Clinic. I think we also have a lot of resources for that at St. Philip's, where we can be plugging people into community to just love it up. It looks very similar to any human crisis. Probably keeping your mouth shut some and listening a little bit and offering something really simple like a ride to a doctor's appointment or a load of groceries. And I think God uses that as much or more as he does. I will put one plug out here so we do at the Pregnancy Resource Center, we now are capable of doing abortion pill reversal. And the problem with a young woman gets pregnant, decides she wants to terminate the pregnancy, orders the abortion pill. The standard way of doing that is a 2-pill process. If she takes the first pill and has not taken the second pill, or even in some cases has taken the second pill, if she regrets it and decides to reverse it, you can reverse it. Essentially, she's taking a progesterone blocker that prevents her body from providing what that baby needs. We can overwhelm those receptors with progesterone pills or shots. And the problem is finding that woman in that moment. So I think the more Christians that know about this and that this is possible, the more, we are doing lots of work on search engine optimization we're being blocked by all the major search engines because they don't support this. But when a woman you have about like 72-hour window there but it's possible. Thousands of babies have been saved with this procedure. Heartbeat International and some of the other pro-life groups have a crisis hotline. Heartbeat, you can call the hotline and they'll put you in touch with a physician. Dr. Katie Edson at St. Philip's does these reversals. I sort of do them. I'm just the consultant. But if that happens, the more people that know about that, the better.
That's amazing. If that does happen, are there any risk to the baby or to the mother?
Not from the attempted reversal.
Okay, that's right.
From the abortion, yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, the risk of loss is still high, but it's impressive how well it works. If people are interested or want to reach out to me, there's some really good studies on it. APR is what they call it, abortion pill reversal. One of these intersections of the human body with what we believe about what God has given us in the human body. Satan would attack that. Of course he would attack that. It is super interesting and it's one of those places where having some training in the medical field, you're like, oh wow, you can do this, is super cool. But yeah, just finding that woman right at that moment is very hard. So
no, that's cool.
And like you said, it's scary that all of the major search engines are blocking that information for people. And
It's crazy.
As someone with a long background in technology, and we were just talking about this yesterday, that algorithms are as efficient and as useful as the people who write them. And whatever their bias or worldview is, that is what is going to direct the output and the answers that you get. So that's why, as wonderful as the internet is, and it's helped a lot of people learn who otherwise wouldn't be able to learn things, it's also become very dangerous and is a tool for those who have an agenda to completely steer the masses into thinking certain ways.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the control of information.
Oh, yeah.
And that's scary when we get to that level.
And that's why, as Christians, we really, what Dr. Matt said, you have to know sometimes when to be quiet, but it's really up to us to, when we have that opportunity presented to us, to speak the truth in a loving way, because in a lot of ways, that could be the only time that certain people hear the truth.
Because they're not hearing it.
They're not hearing it.
Yeah.
And if you have that opportunity,
or they're not Googling it.
Yeah. You have to share it, because that may be it.
Yeah.
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 And I guess maybe that's back to the question you guys asked earlier. As I get old here, because I'm getting old. I'm turning 40 in February.
It's a safer
way. I think knowing when people are going to hear truth and when they're not, you just see it. When I was younger, I was just willing to blather on about what was right. And people have to know you. They have to trust you. They have to want the answer. I think there's a place for screaming in the wilderness and stuff like this. But I think there's also like a place for just, don't worry what you'll say when you're put in those places, or when you're, don't worry what you will say when they drag you into court. You just trust the Lord. God will give you what to say in those times. And sometimes it might be big controversial truths. Sometimes it might just be, I find myself doing more of this, just smiling and nodding. Yeah, I totally disagree with what you just said. But this isn't the place to like fist fight about it.
Sometimes that's, for some people, that's all it's choosing. Yeah, but for some people who come to you for certain things, or you find yourself in a conversation for someone, sometimes all that it takes is to just kindly disagree with them, to get them to then think about, why did this person disagree with me? And then they actually work it out themselves. It's planting a seed sometimes.
So in my undergrad, I did culture anthropology and a lot of study on third world relief work and this idea of a felt need versus the real need. You go into a developing world situation, whatever, urban, rural, and there's big, obvious, screaming, bleeding ulcers, right? You just, oh my gosh, these people have like terrible water supply. But there are there's probably like millions of like water filtration systems not being used for water filtration in Africa right now, because we just have been throwing money at our problems, or we've been throwing money at our like Western guilt, and where the real reasons for some of these dysfunctions are very different. But at the same time, when you're talking to somebody, they're there for a felt need. Hey, Matt, I'm on your schedule to see you because X, and you have to meet them there. You have to meet expectations. You have to say, well, yeah, here's the algorithm for how we treat that and what we check next, and looking for that deeper cause, or that willingness to embrace a deeper cause or even consider it. And it may come way down the road from when you think you first see it. So I think we do. I can miss opportunities to love and care for people by jumping in with 2 feet on what I think the problem is. Anyway, I digress.
No, that's good. Piggybacking on that. Yeah. No, it goes along with this next question, and that is, touched on it earlier, there's a deepening distrust, I think, of the medical community. And let's face it, there's cynicism that's just growing generally, right? It's not just the medical community, but in the aftermath of COVID, there's been a lot of things coming out, and it's making people becoming further and further weary of taking the experts' advice. So how do you respond to that? And the other thing is, I know this will touch a nerve. Yeah, it would if my wife were here too. But also people that are taking their medical autonomy into their own hands and seeking alternatives to that. How do you navigate that as a medical doctor, as a physician? Not a loaded question at all. That's a softball.
I definitely don't have the answer to that. Again, I hope everybody realizes my answers here are just mine. Others have done better thought on this, but medicine in America is basically, it's like the bitter end of that 2-day Christmas Monopoly game where two people are duking it out and everybody else is over in the corner like with
drinks.
These are publicly traded companies. They can be sued if they don't make a profit. They are doing exactly what we designed them to do. They're machines. They're doing exactly what the machines we're designing now will do. They are protecting their interests and protecting the interests of the shareholder. The patient is a publicly traded commodity, literally. The physician is one gear in that. So we have to be shrewd. We can't be, I don't think we can be extremists. I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think it's super nuanced. I think it's too easy to come in. There's too much secondary gain for commentators or alternative providers or to come in and say, Western medicine is done, or it's too easy to sling mud. I think we need to think through each individual, this will push tons of buttons. The victory that vaccines have been in the last 100 years versus, could modern medicine take that technology too far and put too much hope in something? Yeah, absolutely. Do I have a strong opinion on vaccines? I talk about them daily. I think we have to just humbly say what we know, not say what we don't know, not over speculate or dramatize the situation. But sure, there's vaccines and there's disease. There's different levels of disease. There's polio and there's chickenpox. Those are two different things. What are the risks and rewards? Having somebody, my answers are never perfect. And I try to tell people that. I'm just giving them the best answer I can and saying, this is what we know. This is what we really don't know. This is what there's a lot of talk about and speculation about. This is what there's just a lot of silly drama about. And we try to, definitely as Christians, we want to stay out of that. We don't want to get sucked into just the political mudslinging of it. We're in information wars. And we're in an information age. Information is power. Of course, we're in an information war. I think as Christians, we give ourselves, our souls and bodies to Christ, right? We pray that in the Mass. We trust Him. We don't get carried away. We realize our bodies are finite things. This, back to your question about anxiety, the most reassuring thing I can think of is to tell people, yeah, your body is going to die. That's a good thing. And God is going to redeem all of these things He's given you. And one day you're going to have a body that you almost won't recognize, but you know what? You will recognize it, because what you have right now in your physical body it's in the image of God. You reflect a piece of the divine image that nobody else does. You are completely unique in your reflection of the divine image. And so if I give that completely back to God and I don't cling on to any piece of it for myself, which is a daily constant fight, then I tackle these medical decision making. God, I don't know exactly what's best in this situation. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to take care of the things that are on my to-do list that I know, that I have confidence in. I'm going to seek advice. I'm going to seek wisdom on it, but I'm not going to put all my eggs in any one basket. Let tomorrow worry about itself. Take a deep breath and push. We're on earth to do stuff, beautiful, awesome stuff. And when we're so sucked into, oh no, I don't know what I think about the childhood vaccine schedule, because man, brilliant people disagree about all this stuff. Or I don't know what I think about the latest COVID vaccine. I need to do more research. I'm going to just say it. I'm pretty sure all Christians have bigger fish to fry than that.
Yeah.
We need to get on our knees and be doing our prayer life and taking our sin seriously, growing. Sin is way more dangerous than COVID. And I see a lot of us paralyzed with fear about the election, or, what's the latest I don't go into all that, but the new virus in Africa that might be coming here. And, we got better things to worry about.
Yeah.
The next hurricane, where it's going, be smart, but be shrewd.
Mm-hmm.
But be first things first.
No, that's good. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19, it says, "Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own?" What are things that we can do to help take better care of our bodies? This is not an endorsement, by the way, but I was listening to a speech that RFK gave the other day. And again, I'm not endorsing him or anything like that, but he was talking about food and some of the things that are in our food, which is quite frankly poison. And it was really interesting listening to that, and it made me think of what we were going to be doing today in terms of this interview. And that's where this question's not just from that, but comes out of what is it that we can do? Again, not, as you said, not making our lives seeking immortality apart from Christ, but at the same time being good stewards.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, I think there's, and we've talked some about this, and one day I'm going to talk to Father Mike Ward about this. I think food is a fantastic, Scripture is full of food. Food is really important. Christ gives himself to us as food. So, of course, in a godless culture and society, Satan would attack us through food. And we have a food industry that definitely does not have our best interest in mind. It is making profit at all costs. Our food industry has destroyed our agricultural infrastructure. America is unrecognizable in the last 100 years from what it was as a largely agrarian society to a largely suburban society now. I think there's lots of good reading. Wendell Berry, of course, being the standard bearer for some of this. Others have talked more specifically to the processing of food, and I could talk for days about this. And one day I'm going to sit down and put some thoughts together to try to synthesize what I think about it, because I'm not totally sure, but Michael Pollan has been very influential in my understanding of where, if we have a food industry, if I make money selling you food, and I know that you are wired to crave three things: fat or oils, salt, and sugar, I am going to get that into my product every which way I can. I'm going to come up with different names for it that you don't understand. I am going to find cheaper ways to create those things, because they are, I'm going to find cheaper ways to create everything. And I am going to create ways to make stuff last as long as possible so I can sell it for the longest time possible. So Michael Pollan's answer to that would be eat whole foods, and not the grocery store whole foods. Eat foods that you recognize all the ingredients of, that you can say, I can pronounce all these ingredients. It has one or two ingredients. Or if I'm going to prepare processed food, but do it yourself in your own kitchen. You can't screw it up that bad. You can, but make it yourself. Understand what you're putting in your body. Recognize that we are called to a proper balance of fasting and feasting, that Jesus himself fasts like beyond what any of us could do. And then I'm pretty sure he feasts beyond what any of us could do. He likes the wedding at Canaan and things like this. He celebrates that. And there's a time for fasting and there's a time for feasting. And we're reading Ecclesiastes with evening prayer right now. Anyway, so there's tons of great theology on how you balance that. And then, so eat whole foods. I'm going to get feedback on this, but eat mostly plants. I am not an exclusive vegetarian. I promise. You guys know this. But I think as we move further away from the indigenous diets that our ancestors ate, you look all around the world, there are staple foods that societies unaffected by Western culture eat. And these are whole foods that you could live off completely, such as potatoes, corn. You think of yams and plantains in Africa, rice, whole grain breads from Europe. And this is what society ate. And these things fill you up and never let you down. They're not so tasty that I overeat. They are not, if you're hungry and you've got a basic potato in front of you. How many of those are you going to eat? One or two, and you're going to be fine. Man, if you put bacon bits and cheese and sour cream and tons of salt and butter on there, yeah, now I can eat a lot more than I meant to. I can eat more calories than I meant to. What we're doing with our readily available, cheap, high calorie density foods is destroying our health. And back to that sort of contemplation of what did Jesus put in his body? He had a body. He had no sin. He was unaffected by, or he was affected, but he chose to resist the temptations of the flesh and to control and discipline his passions. And I think that would be my simple argument for eating more plants. And then finally, if you do those first two things, if I eat whole foods and if I eat less plants, guess what? It's way easier to control portion size. And what we should be doing as Christians with our bodies is controlling them, self-control, controlling our passions, doing the hard work of thinking through what I believe, and then, encouraging one another and leaning into the disciplines and the structures required to make that happen, and pushing back against the forces are ultimately, we're talking a lot, yes, matter matters, but the converse of that is our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Our struggle is against Satan. And I 100% believe that Satan has big control of our big industries that are advertising to us, are making these things so easy. We flipped it societally. Diseases of excess used to be what the emperor had, right? Now diseases of excess are what our poor people, and here in Southwest Virginia, it's a huge issue. Go to a Friday night football game in the counties adjacent to us, and you'll see what the food industry is doing to our society. And then the medical industry is a step behind, offering technical solutions. We have a huge craze in the last few years about weight loss medication, and then pills that are like $3,000 a month, that are being marketed to the upper echelon, any drug on TV. The reason it's on TV is because it's probably not something you should take. Anyway, that's one thing we could talk about in answer to your question, and I don't want to go on and on about that. But I think the church should have answers and thinking on this, and Christian physicians should be speaking out about this. These are not necessarily Christian physicians, but Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn is a Mayo Clinic cardiologist who has some really good thinking on this. Dr. McDougall, who recently passed away, laid a lot of the groundwork for pushing back. Again, Wendell Berry was instrumental in speaking out. I don't know what all RFK has said, but I'm sure he's piggybacking on some of this.
And part of it for him is just seeing the skyrocketing that's happening, like with dementia, just coming earlier, but also autism and some of this stuff. So it's not just
like food allergy, like peanut allergies, all these food allergies, all these gluten intolerances.
Yeah.
And it's food. It's absolutely food.
That's really good. Last question here, because I want to have you back and pigeonhole on a couple of things that we would devote a whole episode to, maybe end-of-life issues, some of those kind of things. So we'll have you back if you're willing to come back and be grilled.
No, I think this would be good for even a semi-regular thing. It's good for people to be able to hear this and for us to have access to
the funny thing
medical profession.
I don't know. I might have said everything I know.
No, the funny thing is, a lot of times people come to me, the priest, and yet a lot of times it's insomnia and all these different things that affect them. And I can talk about rule of life. I can talk about all that stuff, which is my wheelhouse. But it's nice to then have somebody from a medical standpoint also talk about, okay, here are some other things that you can do. Obviously, knowing where Dr. Matt comes from, he's an Anglophile through and through, so he's going to say rule of life is the most important, mass needs to be the center of your life and all that. Sure. But here are some other things that you can do practically to help you. And so I think that's great. Not that I struggle with insomnia at all. That's one of my problems. What do you see, last question here, as maybe some of the major medical ethical challenges that the church is facing now or will be facing in the future?
Yeah. I don't want to go super political, or I don't have strong political opinions. I think, you guys may be hitting the bottom of my knowledge on any of these topics. I think our approach yes, I think we're headed for, it's been going on for all time. There will always be a point, at any point in history, there is a physical, material point of conflict for Christianity, right? And certainly as our society becomes more and more godless and more anti everything that we believe, we're going to see more of that. So there's all kinds of issues. And so I think because I'm not an expert in any of these issues, but maybe just big overarching sort of principles is realizing that Western medicine is not Christian. Okay. Recognizing the motivating factors behind what's being told to you by the medical community, recognizing what's being said to you by the complementary alternative community and why, and what the secondary gains in that world are, because they are equally, in my opinion, corrupted. And then the church having clear opinions on how, and humble opinions and humble thought on this, honest thought, saying when we don't know. I think one of the biggest thing that resonated with my patients through COVID was when I would just say, I just don't know. We just don't know about this yet. Here's what I think is prudent. Here's what I think is excessive. Here's what I think, etc. And of course we should be honest, but I think that's hard. I think we lack confidence sometimes as Christians speaking into what we consider secular issues, because we just don't feel like experts on it or whatever, and because we're not experts on it, right? But we are experts on. We're learning, right? As Christians, as saints, we are learning what God is showing us through our bodies. So if this is transgenderism, if this is euthanasia, if this is abortion, if this is the downstream effects of the porn industry, addiction, these are exactly where Christ would have put himself in reaching out to those people, loving on people that are stuck in these traps, recognizing these traps as demonic, as Satan trying to destroy the human body. Satan hates the human body, and upholding the sanctity of life, the beauty of life, without turning it into the idol of health. So there are way better thinkers and writers on each of those individual topics that I brought up. So I'm not an expert on that, but also would encourage people not to be afraid of those situations. If you are in church, if you're in, like, confession empowers you to be confident in those situations, right? If I'm dealing with my own sin and working at getting the mote out of my own eye, then I can have some confidence in speaking up to the speck in someone else's eye, especially if they're coming to me with a felt need and want help. Then I have some confidence in saying, here's what I think. I don't think that's your issue. I think, and so being confident that God will give us the words to say, not punting as, you should talk to Father Miller. You should. Everyone should talk to Father, but we do have answers. We do have answers. We don't need to outsource counseling. We don't need to outsource any of these questions. We can bring in Western medicine. We can bring in, sure, to an extent, psychology, etc. Dr. Father Randall doing the course on addiction, these kind of topics. We should be scholars. We should be trustworthy scholars, but we should be bold in our willingness to reach out and help people. It's encouraging, right? It's not encouraging. It's super sad. Okay. It's super sad where our culture is going and how many people around us are hurting in ways that were just unthinkable 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Our society there's some really dangerous and sad decisions being made by those around us on multiple fronts, and that is going to get worse. But the encouraging piece of that is we have the answers, and we have to have our doors open. We have to have our arms open. We need to be ready to take those questions, to take those people on and say, hey, yeah, this is where you should be. This is exactly where you should be. Not apologizing for everything we do. No, I'm sorry, was that service really awkward for you?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for being here. When can I see you again? Or when can we checking on people and these kind of things?
No, that's great. Well, I appreciate you coming on and being a part of this, and I think this will be very helpful to people. And like I said, I want to bring you back one of the questions I didn't even deal with, but we will at a later time, dealing with death, the fear of death, and some of those kind of things. And so we'll talk about that at a later time. It's funny you mentioned about food and all that stuff. So Trish is reading this book. She loves it, called Good Energy. I think it's by Casey Means, I think's the name. So I was brushing my teeth this morning and using my Listerine, and she told me that was poison. So I think probably she's going to switch it out. I'm going to have like essential oils or something. But anyways, yeah, she's going to kill me if she listens to this. But
chew on this mothball.
That's right.
Well, I mean, that's a great, so that book is like, everybody's talking about that book right now and being pushed. And yeah, I could talk for days about how we deal with these kind of people who are benefiting from, in my opinion, some sort of like mudslinging anti-ness to the Western tradition of medicine, that is, not the Western, both, but, and how to sort that. What are the motivators? What do these people stand to gain? Yeah, they're promoting a book. They're promoting a personal industry. And they're saying things that everybody's already thinking. And they're often saying things that there's some truth to it, or some total truth to it. But then there's the pendulum swings, man. Then there's fanaticism and how to find the middle ground. And the truth is out there, and you're smart enough to find it. You don't have to like always be like taking the opinion of somebody else. You can sort these things.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Trish will probably fuss at me too.
Yeah.
Picking on her right on the air.
I appreciate you coming in, and yeah, we'll definitely have you back, and we'll delve into some of these other issues that we didn't get to today, but this has been very good. And what I thought I would do is just close us with the collect for the feast of St. Luke the Evangelist. Let us pray. The Lord be with you.
And with thy spirit.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who didst inspire thy servant St. Luke the physician to set forth in the gospel the love and healing power of thy Son, manifest in thy church the like power and love to the healing of our bodies and our souls, through the same thy Son, Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen. Amen. Big thanks to everyone who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We will have Dr. Matt on again. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at podcast@stphillipsblacksburg.org or podcast@anglicanprovince.org, and we will definitely answer those questions in a future episode. Thanks so much. Have a great day.